somebody's got to win this election, and they will. And either the Labour Party is going to get this amazing swing that it hasn't achieved before, given how far down they fell in 2019, or the Conservatives are going to be re-elected to an amazing fifth term of government. I know what I'm putting my money on, but both are massive mountains to climb.
Yes, here we are again then. It's How to Win an Election with me, Matt Chorley, joined by Polly Mackenzie, Daniel Finkelstein and Peter Mandelson with a special emergency episode, weirdly recorded the podcast show. We've been talking about how long the podcast was going to last for because the election still seemed some way off. But this was the moment that Rishi Sunak announced he's going to the country.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July. This election will take place at a time when the world is more dangerous than it has been since the end of the Cold War. Putin's Russia is waging a brutal war in Ukraine and will not stop there if he succeeds. That war has also made it all too clear the risk to our energy security. In the Middle East, the forces of Islamist extremism threaten regional and ultimately global stability. These tensions are exploited by extremists who seek to undermine our values and divide our society here at home. China is looking to dominate the 21st century by stealing a lead in technology. And migration is being weaponized by hostile states to threaten the integrity of our borders. These uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action to chart a course to a secure future. You must choose in this election who has that plan, who is prepared to take the bold action necessary to secure a better future for our country and our children.
So, Danny, let's start with you, because you can claim bragging rights on this, because it was only on Tuesday's episode that you said you'd heard a lot of talk and it was coming.
Yeah, well, look, we all thought if it was going to be before the autumn, it would be May, because he would otherwise go in May and have all this big fuss made about his leadership and losing these elections, and that would make it impossible for him to call an election immediately afterwards. But of course, I naturally think this made no difference whatsoever to the calculation, as it turned out.
Even what you thought made a difference made no difference.
Exactly. And so he has called the election with the only, because on the sort of logic that we all used, which was there's no point waiting and waiting and waiting. Nothing's going to particularly turn up that's going to be better. Maybe the economy will get a bit better, but you might sacrifice this sort of stronger time for a change feeling. It might get worse and worse the longer that, particularly when people anticipate an election's coming, they might get fed up that you're holding it off until the autumn. So that would be my guess. There are lots of little things. He'd also want to try and dish reform, who haven't got their candidates selected. He doesn't want to have the Rwanda policy and then find that it's been instituted, but although people have taken off, people are still coming here, so he doesn't want to see that fail. So this is probably as good as it's going to get, however bad it is.
So, Polly, not January, as you always predicted.
I actually feel quite chipper about that. Like, I thought maybe January, because I thought it was both better for the country and better for the Conservative Party if they went early, and I had a low expectation that they understood that. It turns out I thought too little of Rishi Sunak in terms of his courage and his willingness to put himself out of a job in the interests of trying to kind of maximise the impact for the Conservative Party. So that's good. I've slightly upgraded my impression of Rishi Sunak. That's a positive thing. And I quite like general election campaigns. So I think it will be really exciting to watch it now all fall to pieces as everyone panics and starts squabbling and being frightened and trying to run 19 different strategies all at the same time.
So, Peter, the one thing that Rishi Sunak had was the element of surprise. How surprised are Labour?
The campaign director of the Labour Party has been putting the Labour Party month in, month out since the beginning of the year on election alert. He's been driving people mad, basically. He's
Morgan McSweeney.
Morgan McSweeney, endlessly cancelling everyone's leave, nobody able to relax and enjoy themselves. And they got to a point where they thought, my God, what on earth has got into this guy? What's he put in his tea? And he's turned out to be right. He always had this hunch that they would go before the summer. I have to say it influenced me a lot as well, because, as you know, I've kept saying that, he probably should go before the summer and might. I think what Rishi Sunak has done is to decide to put himself, his family and the rest of the country out of their misery. I think the whole thing was becoming an awful, protracted, bad dream as people sort of hung on, desperate for change, endlessly postponed. And now what he's doing is saying to people, you can go off and enjoy your summer holidays. And by the way, so can I.
So what will be happening right now? If you are ready, you've got your 6-week plan.
Well,
what's happening right now in the parties?
There's one way in which I think the parties aren't completely ready, and that is candidates.
Yeah.
This is both a feature and a bug. So the bug is it's a panic now. So I read an article on Labour List only yesterday saying there were 100 candidates still to put in place. I'm sure they're quite well advanced, but still to put in place. And so therefore they'll, and Reform don't have their candidates. It'll be a problem for some parties. And for some MPs, for example, who are going to resign, haven't announced they're going to resign yet. And in the next week or two, they'll do it, and their parties will have to select in a hurry. But for the party leaderships, this means that they can put in some people they want to be in the next parliament, and they can hurry and do that at the last
This is
minute.
quite an important point, Matt. The moment the election is called, it gives a lot of power to the party machine and the leadership to put in candidates. The power of selection moves just to 2 or 3 people as a subcommittee of, say, the National Executive Committee, in effect controlled by Keir Starmer. And so a lot of these candidate placements now will be an even greater number of Starmer candidates than is already the case and might have been the case if some local selections had continued.
And Polly, what about smaller parties? Because they do, through broadcasting rules, TV and radio, they're not, the internet being a completely separate thing, it's, things have changed. But they do suddenly start getting more attention on them, and there's a plus and a minus to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in order to enforce that, the small parties tend to set up really quite extensive media monitoring operations, including overnight, like literally counting the seconds, counting the minutes.
This is a press officer with a stopwatch.
Yeah, exactly. So that the producers of shows can get shouted at by press officers and to try and sort of correct that. But it means you also need to have some things to say. Of course, consistent with your strategy and in line with your messaging, but also you need to keep having new things, new visits. So getting all of that sort of operational planning, what are your announcements, what are your press releases? I remember the first election campaign I worked on in 2005. We had basically 40 different day plans for a campaign that was shorter than that. So that you could be a bit, flexible and playful, and if it's going to be, it's going to be the policing day, well, fine, we'll throw our lot in and make it the policing day as well. But you need that whole thing. Where are you going to go? Has the trip been advanced? Do you know what you're going to announce? Do your numbers add up? So that when you get that broadcast coverage, you are not then sort of torn to pieces by the journalists, which of course so often happens when spokespeople, happens across all of the parties, are trying to say, 10,000 police officers and how much is that going to cost, or this number of additional nurses and where are they going to be, and so all of that game, all of that briefing documentation needs to be prepared, and then you need your kind of media operation to train your spokespeople to say the right things at the right time, and you will always fail.
I think the party caught most on the hop is going to be Reform UK, because I don't think they've got their organisation together. They haven't got candidates in place. They're going to face many calls from some on the right of the Conservative Party. Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, has already said that they should come, the two parties, Conservative and Reform UK, should reach a deal over candidates,
like they did in the Brexit party.
I don't think that's going to happen. and therefore the Reform UK have got an enormous amount of catching up to do, having been caught on the hop in this way. Polly talks about broadcasting shares, or your point to Polly about that. It used to be the case in my day, I don't know whether it still is, that the broadcasting shares of time in an election is derived from the performance of the parties in the previous election. I don't know whether that's still the case now, but of course the Reform UK party didn't even exist in 2019. So they're going to be at a disadvantage there. But of course the big decision for Reform is whether their spiritual leader, the Ayatollah of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, will be running himself. I think that Clacton possibly beckons for him if he wants to move to a seat where he thinks he has a reasonable chance. If Farage does run as a candidate, it will certainly electrify his party and the campaign, and could of course attract a significant and very interesting transatlantic endorsement from Donald Trump.
And the pressure that will put on, we've talked in the last few weeks, Danny, on the podcast about when you're up against it, as the Tories are, everyone thinks they've got a better idea of how they could win, and the act of them all voicing it makes it less likely.
Yeah, and look, in the 1997 general election, lots of MPs decided they'd do better in their own constituencies by ruling out ever joining the euro, and that caused a massive issue. John Major then had a press conference in which he tried to face down these rebels and define the issues in the election. I'm not sure it really altered the outcome, even that kind of row, but it certainly was a lot of it made it harder for the Conservative Party to focus its election campaign. And without any doubt, when a party looks as though it's down in the polls, and the Conservative Party will be all the way through this election, the stories will be negative. The only thing that is a tiny sliver of hope is that some of the polls will, as we get nearer, they'll orientate closer to realities. There's quite a big gap between some of the polls and some of the other polls, and it's just possible that might create a false sense of momentum. In other words, what's really happening is the polls are readjusting themselves to the actual result, and going from these 27 ones to ones that may be more like 17, and that will look like big progress. So that might help the Conservative election campaign. That's just a possibility. But but my own view is the only thing that is really unknown. The party split, that's important in an election, and could change during an election campaign. And the other thing is leadership ratings. It's possible the leadership rating of either Starmer, which might improve, or Sunak, which also could improve.
I think that the Conservatives will get a bounce for the reasons and in the way that Danny has described. But I think that bounce will be short-lived, because what you'll see emerging during the course of the campaign is the Liberal Democrats doing well and breaking through in a whole shed load of their target seats. I don't just mean in Scotland, where they'll pick up a few, but the entire sort of blue wall of what we've previously described as Conservative safe seats. I think you're looking at potential for the Liberal Democrats of 40, 45 plus seats they could pick up in this election. And as that reality starts to emerge, it's going to shake the Conservative Party to its foundations.
Because actually, Polly, the headline polls, though interesting and they give us an overall sense, they're not that much use, because they don't pick up where the Lib Dems are doing well. They're on 8, 9, 10% of the polls. But if Peter say, as long as all those 8, 9, 10% of people are in 20 seats, and similarly in Scotland, the story in Scotland isn't necessarily being picked up in those headline polls.
So I think that's right. And these MRP polls, which are attempting to sort of model how swing will affect individual constituencies, tend to give the Liberal Democrats a bit of a a bit of a higher number of seats. But the crucial thing is that it's beyond demographics. It's so much about place and about whether there's a sense that the Liberal Democrats are the ones that might beat the Tories here, and that is very much the case in, say, southwest London. I mean, the Liberal Democrats in the recent GLA elections for the first time won a constituency member of the GLA instead of just a list member on the GLA in southwest London. That's quite a high watermark for them, and it means certainly if you're a southwest London Tory MP, you should probably be a bit nervous about your seat. I think lots of that is true across the wider southeast, where actually there's just sometimes a sort of just weird vibe that, it's the Liberal Democrats who ought to win here because it's not Labour, that somehow there's something that's not a Labour area. And then of course there's the more rural areas where Liberal Democrats have historically been strong, the southwest, bits of Norfolk, bits of Cumbria. So there will be places where, I guess, a bit like weeds or cockroaches, there will just be a sort of sense that that's the place to swing to. And, Peter suggested a lot of seats for the Liberal Democrats, but...
You look quite surprised when he said that.
I mean, it's possible. Like, this is really, really unpredictable because it was such a blow that was dealt to the Lib Dems in 2015 that they, and then 2017, 2019, really, really struggling to break through out of those kind of, basically single-digit number of MPs. But... the time when the Liberal Democrats had a massive breakthrough before was 1997, when the big surge of partly pro-Labour but also just anti-conservative sentiment drove a massive swing, and in those places where it felt like Lib Dems were the place to turn instead of Labour, the Liberal Democrats took those seats. And endless sort of debate in the Lib Dems. Is it possible for the Lib Dems to ever really do well unless it's a time when Labour is doing well? And actually, the Lib Dems did continue to grow their number of seats post 97, but there is that sense that it is at root an anti-conservative party, and so at a time of high anti-conservative sentiment, I think it absolutely is possible that you could get to the numbers that Peter's talking about.
I mean, except for removing Conservative members, which is obviously will be one of the things that voters in many places are going to be looking to do if the time for a change mood feeds through in the election result. Beyond that, it will not be very pointful because the Liberal Democrats have decided to stay out of the government they're helping to form, which is a kind of odd decision. I think it will be interesting to see now whether, as it becomes apparent that Labour, we expect Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister and Labour to take office, the election discussion, which has been so much on the problems of the Conservative Party, the fact that it's gone through two Prime Ministers, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, all those things, might turn to what actually is this Labour government we're thinking of electing. What do they actually promise to do? And this slightly odd message they've got, which is, Britain's completely broken, let's do nothing about it, will be tested.
That's your message, Danny.
It is.
That's your issued by on behalf of the...
It is, but it is, it is...
Come on, let's...
The partisan nature comes out
here he
again.
comes.
He's twinkling.
Is that or is that not a reasonable summary? Let me just finish this point, then you can say it's not a partisan point. It is an observation.
No.
It is an observation about, and because I think that's a good electoral strategy for Labour, right?
Yeah.
People believe both those things, right? One, they believe that Britain is broken. If you go to anywhere and you say that, you get a big round of applause. I don't happen to think it, but people do think that. Secondly, they think they don't want a scary government. So the strategy he's got, which combines these two things together, however amusing it is when phrased, that is bang on. It's where the electorate is. So far from it being a partisan statement, I'm complimenting Keir Starmer on a pretty electorally ruthless statement. What the problem for him is, because it's amusing as a combination, it'll come under pressure, and people will begin to ask about that both those points, right? In what way do you think Britain's broken? But most importantly, what is it precisely that you want to do about it? And Keir Starmer's best bet is to live with my caricature and not rise to the bait of trying to say, because actually that's not a good electoral strategy.
But we should remember that Keir Starmer requires a bigger swing than Tony Blair got in 1997 to get a smaller majority than David Cameron got in 2015. He needs a bigger swing overall than we've ever seen in modern British politics to get a majority of one.
First of all, I'd give a lot of brownie points to the Labour Party for launching their 6 first steps last week. I think that was very, very good timing indeed. It gives the lie to those who claim that the Labour Party doesn't have the foggiest idea what it would do in the first months of a newly elected government. On your wider point, Matt, I think there are 2 unprecedented things in this election, one of which is going to happen. The first unprecedented thing is that an opposition party's ever been able to overhaul the deficit that they incurred at the previous election, gain the enormous swing that they need in order to recover and then get an overall majority. I don't think that has been achieved before. So that's the Labour Party's battle with precedent. The other unprecedented thing is that a party in government, like the Conservatives, has ever been elected to a 5th term. That I don't believe has happened either. So both parties have to overcome the precedent, the challenges that they face. Somebody's got to win this election, and they will. And either the Labour Party is going to get this amazing swing that it hasn't achieved before, given how far down they fell in 2019, or the Conservatives are going to be re-elected to an amazing 5th term of government. I know what I'm putting my money on, but both are massive mountains to climb.
Go on then. Well, I'm going to get you to put your money on something more specific. What will be the Labour majority? Each of you. I'll come round each of you. If you're going to predict, we're talking about how to win an election. We've given the background of the campaign. How big, or maybe you don't think there's going to be one, but what do you think will be the Labour margin? Go on then, Polly, you can start.
Well, I've got into this game before, and I'm terrible at it. So, and it's interesting. Danny was talking, before we were recording about the importance of separating what you want to happen from your analysis of what you think will happen. And I certainly remember in 2017 and 2019 when, doing TV and being asked these kinds of things, or through all of those Brexit debates as well, like what's going to happen? I was completely incapable of separating those things because it was so overwhelming. I mean, I think the range of possibilities here is so vast. I think it genuinely is possible that we could get to the point of the Conservative Party sort of just collapsing in on itself in the way that the Conservative Party did in Canada, for example. And that Labour ends up with, a majority of well over 100 and the Liberal Democrats have got 60 seats. But I think that's probably not going to happen. I think it's much more likely, as Peter says, that actually the mountain to climb is really high, that what you end up with is a sort of small Labour majority. I'm going to pick a number, I'm going to say 25.
25. Danny?
Okay. So I agree with Polly. This exercise is impossible. So I'm not going to make what I regard as a prediction. I'm simply going to give you the central expected value around which you can oscillate. And I would say 70. So I'm a little bit... I think Labour will win a solid majority. But I think it will probably, although there definitely is a possibility, this falls short of the tail end of Labour winning a vast majority and the tail end of a very hung parliament.
Yeah. Peter?
In 1997, as the party's campaign director, I forbade anyone in the Labour Party to speculate about any majority whatsoever. I said it reeks of complacency and of taking the voters for granted, and on pain of death, people will open their mouths on this subject.
But
and
now you're a world-renowned podcaster.
No, that means we get
and I'm not going
twofer. We're going to get a prediction and death.
I'm not going to break the habit of a lifetime now.
But
Not even for you, Matt.
A majority?
I believe that the Labour Party will get a majority. I don't believe it will be a hung parliament, but I would say this: the Conservatives are not going to be separated from power easily. They are going to deliver one hell of a humdinger of a campaign. They are going to give the Labour Party a run for their lives. They're going to chase them uphill and down dale. This is not a shoo-in. It's not going to be easy, and therefore the Labour Party's really got to be on its mettle every single day of this campaign.
Are you all excited?
Very.
Well, Peter is.
I'm so excited I can hardly find the words to describe what I feel.
I mean, I was joking earlier, but it is interesting that, I no longer feel partisan at all, really. But it's interesting to see the light in Peter's eyes. And
he's twinkling.
But exactly, it's a sort of fascinating moment where this sense of just wanting to be the person saying vote Labour because it's time for a change. Like, you're just itching to be out there saying that. Danny's less of a, I think, sort of campaigner than
he's not quite saying vote Labour,
but nevertheless, there is that instinct.
Yeah.
Danny's just saying it. If you vote Labour, it won't make any difference because nothing will change.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said that I profoundly don't believe that.
I know.
I profoundly don't believe that if Labour got in, it wouldn't make any difference. What I'm saying is their electoral message will be, it's time for Britain's broken. Let's do nothing about it. That is quite a shrewd electoral message. That they are trying their electoral strategy. Let's look at this. Is that Keir Starmer has tried to close down everything that he possibly can, and his 6 points are quite banal. A Labour government will be far more consequential than that. Of course, it will be. And electing Labour. If people want a Labour government, if they elect a Labour government, they're going to get a Labour government, and it will be very different from the Conservative government. So I am not saying it'll make no difference. If people vote for change, they'll definitely get a change. But if you look at what a Labour's electoral message will be, that's what it'll be. And the Tory campaign will be trying to shove them off. Let's do nothing about it, and show what this change really means. That's what I'm saying.
Well, we'll find out.
I was almost persuaded then to take Danny out on the stump with me, but I'm not sure. I think that when faced with the voters,
he'll tie something to balloons
he
and
might
release
get a
it for
bit
you.
shaky and start.
Certainly.
It's been a brilliant ride since October we started doing this, talking about how to win an election. Now we're going to find out if Keir Starmer knows how to win an election, and that's what's going to be really exciting. Thank you for joining us for our special emergency episode. You can get in touch with us by emailing howtowin@thetimes.co.uk. That was How to Win an Election with Polly Mackenzie, Danny Finkelstein, Peter Mandelson and me, Matt Chorley. We'll see you for our normal episode very soon. How to Win an Election, wherever you get your podcasts from.